Hi everyone, welcome back to Hercule. You'll notice from the title of today's video it's slightly different from what I said we'd be doing at the end of my last video. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to increase and decrease across the three main stitches, so double crochet, half treble and treble. Originally I had planned to show you how to begin working in the round. However, it would be a little bit easier for you to move on to that if you already know these techniques as well. So we're going to go over those today. I'm going to start off by showing you how to do a decrease in each stitch type because it's a slightly different technique for each one. And then I will show you increase after we've done those. And I am also going to show you one more stitch, which is called a slip stitch. So here I've worked a couple of rows of double crochet and then I have started to decrease just at the beginning and end of each row. And what that will do is, rather than us having this rectangle shape, it will pull this in and start to shape it slightly differently. And if I were to keep going at the top, I could end up with a triangle, or you can work it into various other shapes. Shaping your work in this way is usually used in things like making garments, where you would need to, say, making separate pieces. If you were making your back piece and you've got sleeves to attach to, say, a jumper, you would want to have a bit of a diagonal where the sleeves are going to attach, just to give you a nice neat seam. You could work that either way with an increase or a decrease, so you could work from the bottom up and then decrease your stitches to get this diagonal line. Conversely, you could work from the top down, where you would start off doing your increases to get that diagonal line and then just work straight to shape the sides. So we're going to start with the double crochet. I've come across from right to left and I've just got 3 stitches left. I can show you there. So I'm going to do my normal double crochet in the first one, and then for this last 2 stitches here we're going to double crochet 2 together, which is how you decrease. If you're following a pattern, it will be abbreviated as DC, the number 2, and then TOG, or if you're reading an American pattern it would be SC for single crochet. So what I'm going to do is my hook, not my stitch. My hook goes into the stitch and pull up the loop of yarn. Now I've got 2. Now normally, if I was doing a normal double crochet, I would just yarn over and pull through those 2 loops. As we're going to do a decrease, I'm going to leave that stitch unfinished, go into the next stitch along in the row and yarn over, which gives me 3 loops on my hook. You can see I'm in these 2 different stitches. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 3 of those, and that has finished the top part of both of those stitches and pulled them in together. I'm just going to turn around and go into my next row. So into the stitch, pull up my loop, leave the final step of the stitch out and go into the next stitch, bring up a loop. Now I've got 3, and I'm finishing both of those stitches off then in one go by pulling the yarn through all 3. So I'm just going to do a couple of normal stitches and then I'll do another decrease, just so it's easier for you to see the difference, how they actually look in the piece of work. So yarn over and pull up a loop as if we were going to do a normal double, leave it unfinished and go into the next stitch, pull up a loop. Now I've got 3 loops on my hook. I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 3, and I'm just going to do a normal double next to that just to make it a little more obvious when we look at it closely. So here we've got a normal double crochet here. You can see we've got this sort of T shape with the 2 little bits, the 2 loops and then the top, and we've got the same thing here, 2 loops and then the stitch at the top, and then here is where we've got the 2 together, and essentially it's just kind of put an extra loop into a normal double crochet stitch, and it then pulls those 2 stitches below slightly closer to one another. If you do that at the beginning and the end of every row, you'll start getting this diagonal line. It's also used if you are trying to make a curve. If I were to do work a piece flat and then do a decrease in the middle, eventually it will start to curve up like this as it gets pulled in. So I'd use that technique for perhaps making something like a collar for a garment, or most recently a lot of people have been putting rainbow pictures in their windows during lockdown, so that you can count the rainbows when you go out for a walk. And I actually crocheted a rainbow to go in my window, and I did that by doing a decrease. So I had normal strip and I used the decreases sort of at the sides and at the top to pull it down into sort of a curved rainbow shape. So it's a really handy thing for making different shapes other than your sort of standard squares and rectangles that you make just by working backwards and forwards. I'm going to show you how to do it with the treble next, just because that's slightly easier, as I've got 2 different methods for doing it with a half treble. So it's very similar in that we start the stitch and we just leave that the last step of creating the stitch unfinished, and we move on to the next one. So as I'm doing trebles, I'm just going to chain 2, and I'm just going to do a normal stitch in the first one. When I'm working with trebles, I prefer to do, if I was doing a decrease at the beginning and the end of each row, I actually prefer to do the first stitch and the last one, and then the decrease across the next 2 stitches. It's entirely personal preference for me, but it just gives a neater edge overall, I feel. So that's what I'm doing here. And you can see on this one I've already worked a couple of decrease rows. I think I did 1, 2, I just did 2 rows of normal trebles, and then I've been doing decreases going up, so you can see this is starting to make a different shape. So I've done my treble in that first stitch, and now we're going to work a treble decrease. So yarn over and into the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, so we've got 3, and then for our normal treble we do yarn over and pull through 2, and then we'd repeat that, yarn over and pull through 2. But we're going to leave that last step and leave that unfinished and just go on to do another treble in the next stitch. So we'd yarn over again into that stitch, pull up the loop, yarn over and pull through 2. And now you can see I've got 3 loops on my hook, and we're going to pull through all 3 of those, which completes those 2 trebles that we hadn't finished and gives us this triangle. So if you get like an upside down V, and that will pull this edge in. So I'm going to do 1 normal treble like this, and then I'll work another decrease next to this to show you again. So we yarn over into the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and through 2, and then the post of our treble isn't quite finished. We're going to move on to the next, yarn over into the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and through 2. Now I've got 3 loops left on my hook. I'm going to finish both of those half done stitches in one go by yarn over and pull through all 3, and that's a decrease. And then I'm just going to work a normal treble to the next one, so then we can see the difference between the stitches that we've just made. So I've gone here, that's my turning chain, my stitch, trebled 2 together there, then I've done another normal treble on its own, and I've trebled 2 together there, and there's a normal one at the end. So you can see I've got these little triangles here where I've done 2 together, and instead of there being in 2 stitches above that, there's just 1 on that next row. So more often when you're working increases and decreases, they probably will be in treble, just because this stitch is used more than any other for making anything and everything really. And then I'm going to show you next half treble. It's ever so slightly different with half treble in that the way that is usually taught is not the method that I use. So I've just made a swatch here. This is just a couple of rows of normal half treble, and then sorry, I've knocked my camera, where I've started to decrease, you can see that there's these little diagonal lines that are visible, which is part of the decrease stitch. And that is using the method that I'll show you first. It's not really a problem that these are here, but for me personally, just to make it a little bit neater, I do them slightly differently myself, where you don't get these diagonal lines showing. So I'm going to show you both ways, and then obviously you can decide which one you prefer, because it's entirely up to you. So here is my beginner part. So I've done a couple of rows of just normal half treble. I'm just going to pull a few out just so I can show you at the end of this row. There we go. So normally when we work our half treble, we yarn over into the stitch, yarn over again, and we pull through all 3 of those loops, and that's our half treble. So going with the same method that we've done for the double and the treble stitch, we're going to skip the last step and move on to the next stitch to do our decrease. So it would be yarn over into the stitch, pull up a loop, and then instead of doing that final step, you would go on to start another one. So yarn over into the stitch, pull up a loop, and then we want to complete both of those in one go. So we've got 5 loops on this hook, and we'd yarn over and pull through all 5 of those in one go, and that is your half treble 2 together. It's quite a lengthy abbreviation, so it would be HTR number 2 and then TOG when you're reading a pattern. If it was the US version, they call that a half double, so it would be HDC 2 together. So you can see I've got my decrease just here, and we've got this diagonal line across the middle, which is one of the loops that we've just made. So I'll show you that again, as that is the normal way of doing it, shall we say. And then I'll show you just a slightly different technique that I use, just because I find it looks a little bit neater overall. So I've just done a couple of normal half trebles there. Now we're going to work our decrease. So yarn over into the stitch, bring up your loop, and instead of pulling through all 3, we're going to move on to the next one. So yarn over into the stitch, pull up your loop. That gives us 5 loops left on our hook, and we're going to yarn over and pull through all 5 of those in one go, and that's our decrease. So you can see there's quite a lot there, because that's then sandwiching all those 5 loops underneath. So my version is ever so slightly different. I'm just going to work a couple of normal half trebles, and then I'll show you again. The reason that I do it slightly differently is just that this is a little bit bulky, and you tend to end up with this one loop here being very obvious. I don't know if it's just my particular tension that creates that, but it's something that I notice and I don't like it. So the way that I actually do it is, it starts off the same, yarn over into the stitch, yarn over and 3 loops on the hook, and I want to move on into that next stitch, but I'm not going to do that yarn over first. I'm just going to go into that next one and pull up a loop, so that actually leaves me with just 4 loops on that hook, and then I'm going to pull through all 4 of those. Now it's not going to lose any height from the stitch. It is still going to be the same stitch height as the other ones, so we're not going to have a little dip in the middle, even though we've only got 4 loops in between rather than the 5 that we had. but if you can see, this is the decrease that I did with the 5 loop method, and we've got that one little strand that's really obvious, and then with the 4 loop method that I've just done, it's a lot smaller and it's sitting a lot closer to the rest of the work. So I'll just show you that one again. So it's yarn over into the stitch and pull up a loop, and then instead of yarning over again, we're just going to go into that one and pull up a loop. We've got 4 loops on the hook, yarn over and pull through all 4 of those. And as I said, I just find that gives a slightly neater finish, but won't affect the stitch count or anything, or the height of the stitch. So it's fine to do the 4 or the 5 method one, just whichever one you prefer. And it's like I said, sorry about that, just knocked my tripod over. You'll notice from these videos that I do them as it's pretty much a continuous stream of consciousness from me. Video editing is not my forte. I prefer to spend my time making things with my hands like this rather than making things on a computer. So the odd places where there are mistakes, that's just me being human, and you'll have to forgive those minor things because I don't do any editing to my videos. So now that we've done that and had a little whoopsie, I'm going to show you how to increase. Increases are much more straightforward than decreases. There's no special technique that you need to do. It is quite literally doing 2 stitches in the same place. So I'm just going to work 1 here and carry on working in half trebles just because that's what we were doing already. So I'm going to do my increase in this next stitch here. I'm going to go into that with one of them, 1 half treble stitch, and then instead of moving on into this next one, I'm going to do another half treble just here. There we go. And that's a half treble increase. And then I'll do another 2 in this one as well. So I'll go into my next stitch and do my half treble, and then I'm going to go in there again and do that half treble, and that's another increase. And you can see now there's extra stitches on that row above, so that's going to increase the number of stitches for my next row. Again, you'll usually have an increase being sort of at the beginning and the end of a row, just to give you some symmetry, although you might also find them being in the middle. It has a similar effect in that you're going to get a curve, but that curve is then going to be at the top instead of curving the other way like it was when I was showing you with the decrease. So again, this is commonly used in things like garments, but it can be used for creating a lot of other special stitches, we'd refer to them as. So it's where by doing fewer or more stitches, you end up with this bit overall looking quite different. So when you're trying to create a more textured fabric, you might want to have things like bobbles or fan shapes and that kind of thing. And that's when we tend to use the increases by doing multiple stitches in the same place, even multiple stitches together in the same place, and then that will give us a slightly more 3D effect when we complete the stitch, where we haven't sort of these bumps in there, or if we did multiple ones, they'll kind of spread themselves out and create this fan shape. So it opens up a whole new possibility of different textures and patterns that you can make. And then the final stitch I want to show you for this video, we're almost at the 20-minute mark, is a slip stitch. A slip stitch is quite often used for closing a round, which is the most common, but they'll also be used when you're making special stitches just to close them off. And it starts off similar to a double, where we don't wrap the yarn before we go into the stitch, so we're just going straight in there and pull up a loop. So we've got these 2 on the hook, and instead of catching this working yarn, that loop that we've pulled up, we're actually just going to pull it straight through that working stitch. So what this does is it gets you across to the next stitch, but it doesn't create any height. So it just closes it off without adding essentially what's going to be another row to it. So most commonly it'd be used like working in the round to finish the row, because we've got to find a way of then getting up to the next bit, and you can't really turn when you're doing a circle. It's worked continuously, so that's where a slip stitch really comes in handy. And as I said, for closing off special stitches, you might sort of do your however many trebles, for example, in one place, and then you just do a little slip stitch on the top just to finish it off and give yourself just that one working loop again. So I'll just do one more of those for you. So into the stitch, yarn through, and then we're just going to pull it through that loop without wrapping the yarn anywhere. And you'll see again, it's not really added any extra height because we're still pretty much at the same height as the stitch next to it. So we're not building up and creating a taller piece. So that's it for the stitches. So the next video is where we are going to look at beginning to work in the round. So I'll be showing you how to work your stitches in a continuous loop. I'll show you 2 different ways of starting a circle, doing it by chain method or doing what's referred to as a magic loop or magic ring. And before I go today, there's one more thing that I just want to tell you about briefly. A friend of mine runs a YouTube channel. Her name's Lauren, and her channel is called Lauren's Corner. She is a published author and poet, which is the main bulk of the videos that she does on her channel. However, she also does interviews on her channel with other YouTubers in a series called Asking Questions, and she very kindly invited me to do an Asking Questions video with her last week, which is basically just me and her talking together, streamed completely live on her YouTube channel, and she was asking me about sort of how I got into crochet, and a general chit chat between the two of us. It's quite long, so grab yourself a cup of tea before you start if you are going to watch it. I will put the link either in the description, or I may even have a go at actually putting a little link up here somewhere. If that doesn't pop up round about now, have a look in the description below the video and it will be there. In that video you also get to see my face rather than just my hands, if that's something that would interest you. But if you do go and watch it, please leave a comment. She'd really appreciate that. Speaking of comments, if there are any other tips or techniques or stitches or anything that you would be interested in seeing me do a video of, please do leave a comment below this video or below any of my other videos, and let me know what you would like to see. So thanks for stopping by, and I will see you again soon. Bye bye.